You haven't even graduated to any kind of actual human relationship yet?
And what would that?
After 6 months of dating my wife, at that point I was calling her my fiance because we were engaged. Fear of commitment, passivity, men who will not take the lead in their relationships.
Okay. It's not a fear of commitment. That's another trope. Men do not fear commitment. Men take on more commitment than women do today. Men will take on more commitment when it comes to school, when it comes to the military, when it comes to their family, when it comes to a job, when it comes to a business, when it comes to name the commitment. The only time we talk about a fear of commitment is when it's in the female context. Oh, they won't commit to a woman, so therefore they're committophobes. No. You don't recognize the fact that he's spending X amount. He's committed to the U.S. military. He's committed to his business. He's committed to taking care of his sick mom. He's committed to, his family. He's committed to the Little League team. Who knows? We won't recognize that commitment, but we will recognize the fact that he won't be committed to her. Maybe he's getting more data points. Maybe men need to do that because today, as you just pointed out, it's a really hectic market out there and you got to be 100% sure. In fact, I would be less worried about a guy committing than I would be about him the reasons why he's not committing.
Single people kind of meandering along, floating on the tide, dating for no particular reason with no end goal in mind, too afraid to even call it dating. All of these have been major problems for years. They've been problems increasingly ever since we came up with the idea of dating to supplant the idea of courtship. That's really what.
Okay, now we get back to old order thinking again. Stop calling it courtship. Stop it. The reason why you even have that word in your vocabulary is because of courtly love, is because of the romantic ideal, because of chivalry 1.0, well, actually 2.0. Because your misguided, romanticized ideas about what chivalry should be, about what courting should be, the appropriate way to do those things. And those ideas came from 13th century Western Europe, from the aristocracy of that time. Courtly love, look it up. Stop thinking of it in those terms. That is old order thinking. I'm not saying that there couldn't be a better way for us to engage with one another and to find love and to form families. I'm not saying that there's maybe not a better way, but I will tell you this, that better way is not in the 13th century. Stop calling it courting. Start looking at it. I would almost go with Jocko's suggestion before I would go with Matt's. Oh, we need to get back to what really is a deficit in courting. As nice as it would be to think that you could do that, as nice as it would be to think that we could go back to happy days in the 1950s at the sock hop. Monday, Sunday, happy days. Like, you're not going back to that. That kind of dating, Brady Bunch dating, doesn't exist anymore. Find a better way forward. Yes, absolutely. But stop calling it courting and stop thinking that you're going to go back to an old order romantic ideal that died in 1986. Stop it.
The train went off the rails. The dating apps have only, as I said, made all of this worse. They've poured fuel on that fire, though I'm not sure that fire.
The dating apps have only met a demand that was already there, Matt. Oops.
Graduated to any kind of actual human relationship problems for years. They've been problems increasingly ever since we came up with the idea of dating to supplant the idea of courtship. That's really when the train went off the rails. The dating apps have only, as I said, made all of this worse. They've poured fuel on that fire, though I'm not sure that fire is the right analogy here, because that evokes something that's burning hot with passion and intensity. But passion and intensity are the opposite of what most single people encounter out in the dating world right now. And that is why the dating apps, at least the swiping dating apps today, are canceled. Hey, listen.
That's enough of that. No, Matt, there's probably a lot more hot, passionate sex going on than you're willing to acknowledge. Because generally speaking, from the position of, say, Hinge or Bumble, certainly those two apps, but Tinder for sure. Go look at the data from the general survey study from 2018 and 2019, and look at the data. So I've done several shows on this. Go look at those. Yeah, sex is definitely happening for women, not for guys, for women. But it's the men that we're trying to hold responsible. It's the men that we want to say, it's your fault. You have a porn addiction. You have a video game addiction. You have this addiction. You have that addiction. You're not like me. You're not cool like me. You're not cool and married like me. I've been married for 25 years. Thank you very much, Matt. But you're not cool like you because you're 10 years in. Jocko, God knows how long he's been married. We don't have I'll be the first to admit, we don't have an understanding of this. We don't, because we're certainly not a firsthand understanding of it. I do, in a sense that I know a lot of people who are in it. From a third party, I think I'm pretty well versed in what's going on. But I'm also realistic when it comes to why men and women are on these apps in the first place. Those apps are meeting a physical, evolved need, mental demand. And so to say, well, more men would get married. Really, without saying it, say it without saying it. Really, what he's saying is men need to man up and get off these apps and start courting women in the old-fashioned way, so that we can get back to the good old days, back to happy days again. Give up your porn addiction. Give up your video games. Man up. Be a better. Again, you can't argue with that message. Like, do the work. Okay, be a better guy. Good. What are you doing it for? Well, I want to be a good husband when I finally meet the one. Well, then we got a problem. It's not about masculine empowerment. It's not about the power dynamic. It's not about becoming the best version of yourself, which I've heard a bazillion times now. It's not about doing the work. It's not about any of that. It's about what it is. What is your nature? What is your evolved purpose? What is your direction there? Is it good to do all that stuff? Absolutely. Be the best that you can be. I would never say anything against that. But when that is weaponized against guys for not following an old order way of thinking, that's when I have a problem with it. When we see all these horrible problems. We see, the marriage rates in the toilet. We see not enough fathers, being involved with their kids, which is nonsense, by the way, statistically nonsense. We see all of this, these same old order tropes, these same old order reasons for this. Men need to be more responsible. Men need to do this. Men need to do that. Blah, blah, blah. But if we're only looking at it from one side, and it's easier to point at men because men are supposed to be responsible. We're supposed to sacrifice. To be a man is to sacrifice. Go pick up my fourth book, which is The Rational Male Religion, available now on Audible, which is this book right here. In there, I speak about exactly this. Men have been defined by their sacrifices. We are the disposable sex, evolutionarily speaking. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying that that's what it is. We have a burden of performance. To be a respectable man is to do something, to have honor, to be respectable, to take responsibility, to be a protector, a provider, a father, right? Be parentally invested, right? And yet we see women's nature being unfettered over the past 60 some odd years. And we look at what's going on as far as our marriage rates are concerned, as far as family creation is concerned, as far as like fertility rates are concerned. And you know where we go? We don't go at the women. We don't point at them. We don't say, it's you who are doing this. Why? We don't say that. We call them people. We want to generalize that as much as we possibly can. We don't in any way want to offend the sisterhood. Because for the last 65, 70 some odd years, we've been conditioned by a blue pill dynamic, by a blue pill conditioning to default to self-deprecation like he does in the beginning here. That's really the point, is the mindset. The mindset is, this is what I think should be work. It should be this way. Men should be responsible. So, and men are more empowered. Men have more power than women. So therefore, it's their responsibility to, course correct. No, Matt, you need to look at women. No, Matt, you need to look at the difference between responsibility and authority. Sorry, Jocko. You know, it's nice to see those. It's nice to see all that, those data sets. It's nice to see, you know, you're looking for little data points. But the reason why guys are not vetting isn't because they're dumb. It's because they're necessitous, and they're in a gynocentric social order that has made them even more necessitous, because all we do is put the power of choice in the hands of women. It's not in men's, at least in this dimension. It's not. We live in Sadie Hawkins' world. Do you know what Sadie Hawkins is? You ever been to a Sadie Hawkins dance when you were in middle school? It's supposed to be some sort of gender bender, right? Is swap the genders. So instead of the regular Happy Days sock hop dance where the guy asks Susie out, Sadie has to ask the guy out. And that's where we live right now, is in, well, ideally is what they would like us to live in, is Sadie Hawkins' world, where men just line up, okay, and that guy will do and that guy won't. 80% of you go and 20% of you stay. Statistically speaking, evolutionarily speaking, Darwinistically, that is the truth. And until you accept that we live in Sadie Hawkins' world now, where the little girls go and ask the boys out to this high school dance, you know what happens at the end of that? You know what happens in a say, you know why they canceled Sadie Hawkins dances? I don't know, maybe they still do, but probably not anymore. It's not as novel an idea anymore, because all the girls will go and ask the cutest boy out, and it can only be one boy and one girl at the dance. So the cutest girl asks the cutest boy out. He says yes, and they go to the dance. Meanwhile, the other girls who don't want to go with those other schlubs sit home and grind their teeth. And the boys who didn't get selected, they sit home and they grind their teeth, or they get drunk, or they jerk off to porn, or they develop, prescription opioid, addictions, whatever it is, however they cope with it. And women, on the other hand, say, I guess I'm going to be 35 and I'm going to die alone. Oh, well. And then they go back to their box wine and cats and Ben and Jerry's or whatever it is. That's their sedation. Usually it's ego appeasement. For women, it's usually ego appeasement. It's a better sedation than anything. I know people say box wine. Ego appeasement is it gets you drunk it gets girls drunk way better than anything else. Ego appeasement. So we go to that. And that's what happens. So the hottest women share the hottest men because we live in Sadie Hawkins' world. Exactly the situation on Tinder that Matt doesn't want to address. They're only go 7,500 swipes until they get a meaningful relationship, a meaningful interaction. Who's doing the swiping? Who? It's not like these fiendish men. Yeah, no, screw her. She's fat. No, it's not them. Look at the differentials, man. Address the real problem, or don't address it at all. Go back to politics, man. You're pretty good at that. Go back to religion. Stay out of the red pill, Matt. Stay out. Jocko, you're good, but red flags are what they are. Not because we're not holding men responsible, but because we use responsibility as our scapegoat, as our rationale. Men should be more responsible. Okay. They shouldn't be online on Twitter swiping left and right. Well, they're not. They're on OnlyFans mostly, but look at the entirety of it. I would say, well, who cares? Nobody cares about this stuff. Well, apparently you do if you're watching this show. Apparently you do if you just made a comment. Apparently Jocko does. Apparently Matt does. Apparently the guys in the roommates certainly do. Apparently Candace Owens does every so often. Yes, you care. You care enough to make a show about it. You care enough to leave a comment about it. So rather than grinding your teeth and thinking you're too cool, or rather than creating a 5 or 10 or 20 or 1 hour video about all how, men need to man up, whatever, at least be complete. At least be comprehensive. There's two sides of this. And I know you don't want to step on the little lady's toes, but sometimes at some point you're going to have to. I can do it right now because I've been doing it for 20 years. And not because I don't like women, because I love women. That's why I want men and women to get together and have babies. I would very much like that to happen.